Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to this webinar today. Just waiting a couple of seconds until participants are joining. All right. So I just want to start before diving into the webinar that I think the situation right now is a pretty stressful one with Ukraine. It's on our minds, and nonetheless, I'm happy that we can have this webinar today, Christian. So thanks a lot for joining.
Well, thanks for having me, and yeah, it's great to be here, despite the obviously terrible situation going on abroad.
Absolutely. And so yeah, welcome everyone as well, the audience here to this webinar today. We're having Christian Facey with us today. Christian is the CEO and founder of Audiomob. And today I'm looking very much forward to learning more about Audiomob's unique story and product, and also hear about your growth so far, and also how your ownership, your approach to ownership has been as a company at Audiomob. And as some of you might know, we always take questions at the end, so feel free to put them in, to type them in into the Q&A panel, and we'll take some time at the end to answer them. So Christian, I would say let's dive right in. And I think my first question would be really about you and the story of Audiomob. And so, Audiomob was founded quite recently in 2020, but has achieved incredible things since then, such as raising a 14 million Series A recently, and securing a 100 million valuation after less than 2 years, which is really incredible. So really curious to learn from you. Could you tell us in a few words, what has been the story of Audiomob?
Yeah, sure. So back before I formally started my entrepreneurial journey, I managed around $100 million at Google as a strategist. Then I crossed over to Facebook to become a science partner. So that's measuring the true value of ads and how they influence people along a kind of conversion funnel. It's less creepy than it sounds, don't worry. Outside of work, I developed my own mobile games. So a massive gamer, so I decided to start developing these games. And I'm also a massive fan of hip hop and jazz music. So this is a kind of traditional chilled out hip hop and jazz, or lo-fi hip hop. And I've been producing that since I was 14, less so now because I'm scaling Audiomob. And I started streaming this music into the games that I was making. And this was as I met Wilfrid, who I met at a Google Christmas party many years ago now. And he's an ex-engineer of Google, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs. And then we started looking at the concept of streaming audio ads instead of music. So it's a combination of like advertising expertise, music and gaming that led to uncovering the concept of non-intrusive audio ads in video games.
Sounds great. And so how, super inspiring story. I'm also, by the way, a big jazz and hip hop fan myself. Would love some recommendation on that side, but would also be very curious to learn how did then you started Audiomob with a colleague of yours. How did you then achieve this incredible growth in the past almost 2 years?
So we essentially had to do so outside of pivoting from music into games, into audio ads in general into games, let's just say when you work very, very hard and raise your first $1 million, and this is in January 2020, and then the world shut down, we had to completely pivot our way of thinking as to how to scale. And one of the founders of PayPal always mentioned on the call that we had with them that if you're in times of economic turmoil, you should really double down on what you can double down on. And in our case, it was R&D, because while more people were playing games, a less known fact is that less games released in 2020 than 2012. So all of the upcoming games we were going to integrate into all got delayed by 8 to 12 months. So what we had to do is we basically used the narrative that more people will be playing games, which means that gamers and this whole addressable market of gaming will consolidate at a higher level after the pandemic's over. So we used that to raise more money, and then we made a 7-figure R&D investment throughout the whole of 2020. So our revenues were wiped out for the whole of 2020, but the R&D play worked, and then our revenues just shot through the roof between January 2020 and until this day. And that kind of story and that trajectory is what helped us 10.5x our valuation in under 11 months roughly.
Wow, super impressive, and congrats for that. And then diving into, so you mentioned R&D and product, diving in a bit more into that. I'd be very curious to hear who are actually your key customers at Audiomob, and what is your core value proposition as a product?
So I guess I'll start off with the core value proposition, which is the fact that we provide non-intrusive audio ads in games. So a gamer can now be monetized while listening to an audio ad, and they can keep playing the game or using their app rather than being shown another video ad that blocks the primary motive of the gamer, which is to play the game. And for the gamer, the benefits are, gamers need to be monetized if they want to keep using these apps for free. And even when they're not free, game developers want to keep making more money from ads outside of in-app purchases, otherwise known as IAP. So the benefit to the gamer is it's a less intrusive way of being monetized rather than being blocked to be monetized. The game developer makes much higher revenue, incremental revenue with these audio ads as well. So for those of the call that aren't from the space, so when you've got a video ad, that video ad comes from a number of exchanges and demand partners, advertising demand partners. And the audio advertising demand partner would usually buy ads on Spotify. But we are basically the first company to design the ecosystem to bring audio ad revenue, not video ad revenue, into mobile games. So it's incremental revenue in every sense of the word, because this is revenue that the game developer never would have seen before, and it doesn't damage the player. And sometimes it increases retention because, again, gamers are dropping off less because they're not being intruded upon. And then you've got a price efficient entry point for advertisers as well. So a gaming CPM, a cost per 1,000 impressions, that is, for a video ad could range between anywhere from $15 to sometimes over $100. And brand advertisers would never, ever pay that to that extent, that price for a video ad. However, via our audio ads, they can enter a much more price efficient entry point, which is 10 to 15 times cheaper. But we see 1,000% increase in click-through engagement because of how we target our audio ads as well. So the reason that the R&D was a 7-figure sum is that we had to find the trifecta, which is what benefits the advertiser, the game developer, and then the end user as well.
Makes sense. So really like a platform that really matchmakes game developers with advertisers, essentially.
Exactly, yeah.
Makes sense. Thank you. And could you, in that journey, in that rocket ship journey, I would be very curious to learn, could you share one or two of the biggest challenge you faced while scaling Audiomob so far?
Okay, absolutely. And actually, I'll use this to tie in the second part of your last question, which was key customers, which initially started off as every single major music label. We closed deals with them within the first quarter of last year, but now it's mostly large agencies and large game developers like PhD, Omnicom, Group M, and then the usual agency suspects. And then the game developers, some of which I can mention, some I can't. One of the largest ones is Social Point, which is owned by Take-Two. Take-Two bought Zynga for $12 billion. So you can kind of get an idea of how big that opportunity is for Audiomob and the industry in general in terms of mass market validation with premium gaming publishers. So those are the kind of clients that we're concentrating on right now. And in terms of the biggest challenges, so one of the biggest challenges was, starting off with the pandemic, was figuring out how to pivot from a situation where advertisers were just spending less and game developers are releasing less games. And the idea was to bring forward our advertising platform forward by 2 years, where we convert pre-existing inventory, so pre-existing like banner ad slots that you find at the bottom of the game, converting that and then building an ad targeting algorithm that specializes around audio to target specific games. So what we did with the launch of the DSP, or the beta version of the DSP in Q4 2020, it gave us access to over 40,000 games. And then I trained up a sales team with my co-founder Wilfrid to sell that DSP and those games. And now we're getting to a point where we could start concentrating more on the direct integrations. So that was kind of the first challenge. And the main thing I learned from that is it's really important to control every part of the value chain if you're in times of economic turmoil. So from how you sell to the demand partners, to how you get access to the inventory, to how you integrate with the right game developers, how you test that as well. Have control of as many parts of the process as possible, even if it means you need to temporarily kind of front money to control as much of that process as possible. That is something that we massively learned. And then the other problem that we are figuring out right now is the fact that we actually have too much interest now. So if you have a team of 17 people and you've got advertisers that want to buy the audio ads, which is good, but then you have game developers that are like the largest in the world that want to integrate with you at once. Like of the top 50 publishers, we have around 8 of the top 50 gaming publishers in the world that want to integrate with us and they want to launch this year. And, you know, the excitement is great, but, you know, a team of 17 people scaling into, you know, some of the biggest games in the world, of which these companies have hundreds of people, it's that teething process from going from, you know, you've just raised a Series A and going from seed stage to growth mode. That is a challenge in the sense that, you know, I've got to scale up every single aspect of the company in terms of how we function, how we onboard directors, how those directors onboard new people. So I'd say that that's the biggest challenge. I'm thankful it's a common one, so I've got a lot of sources to learn from. But I'd say that that's probably the second one. It's shifting to growth mode quickly. Totally.
On the good side, I think it's a good problem to have as well. So that's it's great that you know the demand is so high. And so I think this is actually a perfect segue into my next question, which is what are your goals in 2022? You know, what's your vision for the next 12 months? What do you want to reach with Audiomob?
So if in 2021 the idea was to get the word out, so most people in the marketing space and in the gaming space now know what Audiomob is, and they either want to test or scale the audio ad concept. So getting the word out and obviously raising a Series A was the main target for 2021. 2022 is establishing a structure of the company. So we're at 17 people. We should be at 35, well, between 31 and 35 people by the end of H2. And that is the structure that is going to allow us to hire the next 70 people very efficiently as we expand internationally. So getting the hiring structure of the company elevated to a growth stage company is definitely one of our top priorities. And I guess the joint top priority is now we're scaling to, you know, truly meaningful revenue with some of the largest clients in the world. So it's getting to a point where the clients have scaled and then they are respending, they're integrating into all the different games. Basically, again, typically going into a growth phase where, you know, you've got the validation and you've got those seeds of growth. And now it's making that growth more consistent and scaling through the different clients in a very structured way. That's the joint first or secondary objective that we're pursuing this year.
Fantastic. And you just mentioned, you know, how to set up a team internationally. And I know that, you know, even if you were founded in London, you have global ambitions. And in fact, we've just talked before in our check-in before this webinar that you just came from the US, you came back. And you also have an office in Abu Dhabi. And I would actually, in this context, be super interested in learning more about how you tackle ownership with such a team, with such a distributed team. And so, I think the first question I would have before we dive into internationalization is thinking about ownership and company ownership. What is the reason why you decided to give ownership to every employee in your team so early on with 17 employees? And what do you think are pros and cons, if you think of any, of doing this?
So the reason that we've decided to do this is I have, and I won't mention the name of the startup. If you're really curious, you can go on my LinkedIn. But I remember I rejected a job offer from Google to go into a startup because I knew I wanted to start my own company one day. And I learned firsthand how a company's run into the ground, bluntly speaking. Like every wrong decision that was made in terms of how the company is run, but in terms of compensation from a salary and an equity standpoint as well. And I constantly have read up over the years, and I still do to this day, read up on the fastest growing companies, how they compensate their employees. And the constant trends that I see is that, every single employee, no matter what level, they get equity, especially when, you're on a rocket ship of a company that we hope will be a multi-billion-dollar company one day. It's that extra layer of motivation that is needed outside of just, presenting, a very knowledgeable and well put together founding team and a good story. Like the equity, like having skin in the game, so to speak, is a really, really important factor. And every single successful company has been able to compensate their employees in that way. So the advantages there is that, especially if you've got a high valuation, you can give substantial, like in terms of monetary value, you can give substantial value to employees without giving a large chunk of your company away. It motivates employees massively, especially when, you are leading a company. You say, I have a target, I have a vision of this year, do X, Y, and Z, and then the valuation goes up. Like the amount of motivation that it gives employees, it's been amazing to see in terms of, we were in 5-figure MRR at the beginning of January, and now we're in the good 6 figures. And just seeing the valuation, the MRR, the new people coming in, and the fact that all of these incremental steps that are, or milestones that are being met, everyone knows that their value is increasing. It's just that extra kind of piece of motivation. And in terms of disadvantages, I can't really think of any disadvantages unless, you've written a share scheme very badly where, I don't know, the shares automatically vest during an employee's first 3 months or something. Like, I don't really see the disadvantages as long as you structure the share scheme and the options contracts in a logical way.
Thanks for sharing that. And would love to, as a follow-up question, go into ownership in an international level. So as just mentioned before, you have team members not only in London, but in fact, globally, such as in Abu Dhabi. So what have been for you challenges in giving ownership in multiple countries, and how have you overcome them?
So we've basically we've generated a framework, if you will, for how to open an office from every single aspect, right? So in terms of the legal support, accountancy support, operational support, and obviously support in terms of distributing options as well. So we've had to take a very kind of structured approach. With Abu Dhabi being the first international office or foreign office that we've opened. We're part of a program called 2454, which provides significant support in every single aspect of opening an office. So that was a very, very good resource to lean on. And even, I just got back from New York on Saturday, and that was part of an industry trade mission. Again, another program that helps you figure out how to open offices. So it's not a case of, you pack your bags and you just go there and you kind of root out how to open an office, like usually being part of some kind of program, funded program, of course. It's very, very helpful. So you don't have to spend time figuring out what you do and don't need to know. So that's how we've overcome it.
Great. And it's a bit of like a side question, but very curious. How come Abu Dhabi? What brought you to choose Abu Dhabi as your first location out of London?
Yeah, sure. So the secret's already out, but I'm surprised how many people don't know this in the media tech and gaming space. The Strategic Investment Authority of the UAE in general, it's their vision to make Abu Dhabi and the UAE in general basically the next Finland when it comes to the gaming space. So Finland is the gaming capital of the world. Supercell, Rovio King, all the big game studios are out there, and it's the world's most prestigious and advanced gaming hub. And the Strategic Investment Authority of the Middle East want to make UAE the next major gaming hub. So in terms of government incentives, in terms of providing free offices, enabling Audiomob to compete in the employment market as well, the benefits are absolutely like amazing. And going there and the amount of business we've generated because of other game studios that have been encompassed in that like ecosystem, it's been amazing. And it's gotten to the point now where the R&D lab, which will be opening up later this year, have to keep that a bit hush hush, but we are going to base it in the Middle East now.
I see. Makes total sense. And I'm actually not a huge gamer myself, so that's why maybe I wasn't aware of this, but really interesting. Actually talking about, Abu Dhabi, London, soon maybe the US as well. I'd actually be curious to talk about education of the team around, like in different countries around ownership, company ownership. Have you noticed any differences, when going into Abu Dhabi, and what are the differences in terms of how the employees perceive ownership in these two countries?
So that's an interesting question, and I would say the difference is it really depends, because you've obviously got expats that that are based out there or might move over that have a very similar mindset when it comes to ownership to more local employees that are based out there. I would say the education and understanding and perception is actually very similar. I'd say the reasons for obviously joining the company, like Audiomob, I've noticed are very different, but the perceptions of ownership seem to be quite similar actually, and the reason being it's that this is kind of an assumption just based on what I've seen, but it's very easy if you Google Audiomob to see like what we've done over the years and what our trajectory is, and there's not really many questions in terms of that, because we thread that into our interview process as well. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty consistent actually.
Great, interesting to hear that. And just in terms of, at Ledgy, we are in fact like employee education and transparency about ownership is, one of the key values we propose with our product. And I'd be just very curious to hear from you, what even motivated you to introduce such a platform as Ledgy, and do you have a favorite part of the product that you can share with us?
Absolutely. So I remember that it was during the round. It was a very stressful time, and I remember I contacted 3 different companies, and the first to jump on the call was Valerie. Shout out to Valerie. Had an amazing first call, and it was like, okay, we could do this, and this. You can get set up in X amount of time, and I'm like, done. Okay, great demo. Let's kind of get this done. So in terms of your onboarding process, it was phenomenal. And the thing that really encouraged me was the transactions, the way that you can map transactions. So going from a kind of a seed stage legal process to a Series A stage process, and the fund Makers Fund is one of the most diligent funds. Hence, they have the reputation that they do. It's almost like a growth stage due diligence process. It was very, very intense, and all of the little details that their lawyers and our lawyers were asking for, mapping the transactions is like so essential, because we actually made some mistakes with the last platform that we used, so we had to migrate. And now it's just so easy that, you know, we've got 70 individual investors that are parts of syndicates and individual angels and VCs and whatnot. And the amount of questions that we get, there's literally a button in Ledgy where you can just pull transactions, or you can pull the cap table, etc. So it's just a very, very intuitive platform where I can get everything that I need very, very quickly.
Totally. And yeah, as you were talking a lot about speed, and speed of execution is just critical in a startup. So yeah, very happy to be able to support you with that. And so Christian, to wrap it up, I would have just one last question for you before we take a couple of questions from the listeners. And that question is, for all startups and scale-ups listening to us today, what would be your top one advice when it comes to company ownership?
The one bit of advice that I would give is, it is so critically important to remind and educate your employees of like what it means to be an owner. And I remember like early on, some employees were like, oh, congratulations to you and Wilfrid. And it's like, no, it's congratulations to us because we are owners. So, we make it a point that in our kind of all hands meetings that we have, that we ensure that that thread of ownership is constantly understood. And now that we obviously have the funding, we're even going as far as introducing kind of more formalized advisory sessions, so employees really understand the ownership. And then what we find is that the outside of obviously believing in the vision, like actually having part ownership in that vision, the motivation just kind of goes like off the charts. So I'd say, yeah, just really making sure that your employees understand, and it's reinforced that, they actually own a part of the company, and that could be worth, substantial value down the line. Yeah, it's really, really important to reinforce that.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. And then, as mentioned, we'll take a couple of questions from the audience. So I see a couple of them here. So one would be, it sounds like Audiomob is a very lean company in terms of headcount. So are you aiming to increase the pace of R&D as you scale, or will it inevitably slow down?
So it will definitely not slow down. We're going to 3x the size of the engineering team, and we're opening up a separate R&D lab as well. We have around 8 years of products that we're planning to build. So we're actually constantly looking to ramp up the amount of R&D we're doing.
Fantastic. Another question here that we have is, do you have any country-specific plans for each country? So UK, UAE, US, or a general scheme that works in all countries?
So, I mean, there's, from what I've read and from what I've learned, there's like multiple approaches that you can take, something more general or something more specific. So right now, like the way that we're structuring it is that you've got like the UK LTD or headquarters, and at the other countries are branches which feed into the LTD rather than it being a separate entity. So using that structure, you can actually use a more centralized plan, if you will. I know that there are some changes that need to be made when there are individual subsidiaries, and the way that or an individual kind of company and the way the companies interact with each other, there may need to be a change to the scheme. But right now, we're kind of using a centralized plan with the current structure that we have.
Makes sense. And one last question before we wrap up that I see here and sounds very interesting. So you, Christian, you have experience in very large companies like Google and Facebook as well. And the question is, how do very large companies like these talk about equity and ownership? And are there big differences between those companies and how you now approach it as a startup founder?
It's a really good question. And the way that Google and Facebook approach it is the fact that they're, blue chip companies. There is a certain level of growth. So don't get me wrong. For most people in the company, your shares might be worth millions, but they'll be worth a substantial amount of money. Maybe what was one of the terms at Google? It's when you cash out, it's basically because you want to buy a house, right? So a house deposit's worth. So we're not talking about pocket change here. Not life-changing money in the grand scheme of things, but definitely not pocket change. So it's almost considered as a substantial a cherry on top of the overall compensation package that you get, and you get topped up as well. And obviously with promotions, the amount of equity that you get, it's not ever about percentages, it's about the value, right? It starts exponentially increasing as you get to, manager, director, VP level, etc. So it's almost seen as like a cherry on top. But the way that I approach Audiomob is, and again, I'm biased as a founder, of course, but I've used the word, this is $1 billion idea multiple times, and I truly believe that, and I know it is. And in terms of us getting to our valuation and 10xing the valuation, that's a very rare thing to do between seed and Series A. And the way that I thread that into the story, which I believe to be true, and we've proven it so far, myself and Wilfrid, is the fact that 10xing the amount of equity from when you start the company to Series A and then 10xing again. It's a life-changing opportunity. And even the way that we are looking at exiting, we were talking about life-changing share value. And the way that I approach it is that it isn't just a cherry on top, even though it looks that way, based on the trajectory of the company and the way that we've performed. There is another level of motivation when equities aren't granted from Audiomob, and that's the kind of thread that we put into the narrative when issuing equity. So it's very, very different from Google and Facebook. Hope that made sense.
Makes total sense. So yeah, the growth journey is essentially a completely different one at this point between a company such as Google or Audiomob. So exciting stuff. Thank you, Christian, so much for sharing all this with everyone. Thank you everyone also for joining. It's a wrap for today. We'll also upload this session on our YouTube channel, so you can check it out later as well. So yeah, thank you so much, and have a great day.
Thanks,